So today on Happy Alaskan, we're gonna head to the cabin where we're gonna spend several days doing projects, baking some bread, and exploring the area. Let's go. All right, so we have arrived at the parking area for the cabin, and now it's just a short hike to get all the way in. Whew. The mosquitoes are already kind of bad. I'm not a huge fan of using bug spray, but I think it's worth it. Hopefully that will help. All right, so we are making it to the cabin. Yay! Well, before we get settled into the cabin, I'm gonna head down to the outhouse. So this cabin is what we call a dry cabin. So there isn't any running water, electricity, or plumbing. So that brings us down here to the outhouse. But you know, it's really nice to get out of the city and be in the woods a little bit. All right, so here we are. And there it is, all its gleaming glory. All right, so I'm done with that. I'm heading back up to the cabin, and my parents are both here for this trip. And so my mom's making dinner. I don't even have to worry about doing that tonight. Does look like we have some dark clouds rolling in, so we might be getting some rain, but they tell me they haven't had to start the stove, have a fire, do anything like that to stay warm. Yeah, they've got some plants going here. We've got a little bit of rhubarb and some strawberries. So it's getting to feel a little bit like summer. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put together our sourdough starter. We're gonna get it ripe and kind of get it prepped for baking some sourdough tomorrow. So I've got my empty jar, and I also have my scale. So I'm just gonna zero that out at 0 grams. Put that there. Get the tare weight on it like that. And then, oh, take a look at this. There is my starter from the fridge. I'm going to mix up. Now, I'd really like to make 2 loaves of bread this time, but I'm just not sure how much starter I have and how it's all going to come together. So let me just start by putting that blob in there. The question becomes, how much will fit in this other jar? Let me see. I think what I'll do, because normally I start out with 100 grams of starter, 100 grams of water, and 100 grams of flour. So let me just start with that, and then we will see. see where I'm at. Okay, well that's 98, so I think I'm pretty close there. Now let me add some water, and just using this water that I have from the bottled water. And once again, I'm just trying to get up to about 100 grams. Well, that's also at 97, so I guess that works too. Just keeping it kind of equal. Oops, that's clear, right? Okay. Then let's see. The flour is what takes up some bulk. Went over a little bit. How do I get it back out? Well, it's going like that. It's all going to get used. So there is that. Okay. All right. Well, mix this up. What I'm wondering is, I still have some starter in this original jar. I don't know how much. I'm trying to not make a big mess. Okay, so basically I've now fed my starter, and then after it sits overnight, then it will be considered ripe and ready to be used.
Look who's here.
Oh yeah. So while we're at the cabin, then we talk to our family that lives in China.
You're
it's universal.
Videoed here.
Oh, okay. So we've got the sun out tonight and got the solar panels up. It's not very sophisticated, just on some chairs, but that does make it easy to move around so we can follow the sun and maximize whatever solar gain we can get. And then when that doesn't work, we have the generator. So yeah, so pretty neat to have different systems to make off-grid living work. Got the sourdough starter getting a little more bubbly on top of the wood stove this morning. You can see where I put the rubber band as the mark of where it started last night. And the goal is to have the starter double in size before you start baking. So I think we're just about there. So now we're ready to start mixing together our ingredients to make our sourdough. So first thing I'm going to do is zero out my scale. That looks good. It's on grams. I'm going to put my bowl on here and then tare that, as it's called. And I'm looking to put in 500 grams of flour. This is a bread flour. Hold on, I'm getting a funky reading there. I've never had that happen before. Something is weird. Never had it where it wouldn't tear. Okay, I'm going with that. Now it's at 0. So I'm aiming for 500 grams. Now I got a little bit too much. So let's scoop that out of there. Oh, now it's not quite enough. Oh, so close. All right at 500, awesome. Let me seal this up right away because there's just a lot of bugs and stuff right now. So I've got the 500 grams in there, and then I want to just add 8 grams of salt and get that in there. Okay, it's starting to pick it up. Yeah, doing things by weight helps me to be more accurate. But that said, I have found that sourdough is very forgiving. I mess things up all the time, and I still end up with a pretty good loaf of bread. So that's really exciting. So I'm going to mix this together. All right, and then that one I'm going to set aside. So next up, I'm going to zero that out again. Put a different bowl on there. Get that to tare. And now we're opening up the sourdough starter that I've had just bubbling away overnight, either sitting in a warm spot just in the cabin, or once we got the fire going this morning, it sat on top of the wood stove on a trivet, so I didn't accidentally bake it, because I've done that before. But this is kind of what it's looking like, and I accidentally moved my rubber band, but it is about double where it was last night. So I'm going to just mix this up. It's looking very sticky. It has a really good scent to it. So for this, I'm looking for about 150 grams. That's 128 grams, so a little bit more. 146. Trying to get right on the dot if I can. Oh my goodness, come on off. Ooh. All right. I try to stay somewhat clean making sourdoughs, which is almost impossible, but out here at the cabin, since we don't have the running water and all that, it helps to just be a little bit more conscientious in that way. So I'm zeroing it out again. I have just some warm water that I heated up on top of the wood stove this morning. I'm hoping that I'll have about 300 grams of this. If not, I'll have to run inside to get a little bit more. Oh yeah, I need a little bit more. Hold on. All right, so I'm back. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. Now I have too much. Okay, my scale's being a little wonky. I don't know if it's because it's at a little bit of an angle, but we're just gonna go with that and trust that that's roughly correct. Okay, so now I'm just mixing the water with the sourdough starter. I'm gonna get those two things combined. And my starter, I actually received it from a friend who had received her starter from another friend. And according to that person, the starter is over 100 years old. So one of the fascinating aspects of sourdough is that if you continue to feed it periodically, it will continue on potentially indefinitely, which I think is pretty amazing. All right, so it seems like that is coming together pretty well. All right, and then I'm going to add the wet mixture with the dry. Get it all in there. All right. Now, I don't propose to be any kind of sourdough expert. I actually just started making sourdough bread on a regular basis probably about 6 months ago. And I just found a recipe in one of my bread baking books, and that's the one that I've been following. However, talking to people and looking at stuff online, other recipes, I've noticed that perhaps the recipe that I've been using is not maybe the best one for sourdough. I've noticed that in these other recipes, they're letting the dough kind of rest in between the stretch and fold periods a lot longer than what I've been doing. However, I also like the idea of just picking a recipe and trying to get good at it. And then once I feel good at it, then just starting to make small incremental changes and seeing the impact of that, if there is any at all. So once again, I'm definitely learning, but it's fun. And as I mentioned before, honestly, I've never had a loaf of bread that I didn't enjoy eating. So I feel like it's super forgiving and just a lot of fun to have some freshly made sourdough bread on hand. It's really not forming the way that I would expect it to. But maybe I just need to get my hands in there. So yeah, and for whatever reason, my scale was just being a little bit wonky. So we'll see. We'll see if this comes together. It might need a little bit more water, actually. Because normally it's a pretty sticky dough. You just add a little more. After all that precision with the scale, then I just dump in some water. But, you know, sometimes we just gotta try things, go for it. And I think I've done this enough times that I kind of know how it should feel at this point in the process, which is kind of a big sticky mess. So, all right, let me just get this mixed. And yeah, this is feeling a lot more like it should. And then I'm gonna let it just rest for about 10 to 20 minutes and we'll come back to it. And this is what your hands look like after mixing like that for the first round. Kind of a mess, but it's worth it. Yeah, so now that I've got my dough just mixed together, I'm going to put my little cling wrap over the top. And this is cling wrap that I actually repurpose after getting pizzas from Papa Murphy's Pizza Place. They wrap their pizzas in these huge pieces of cling wrap, and I find that they're just perfect for using to cover my sourdough. So I'm just gonna put it like that and let it rest. All right, so I've let my dough just sit for about 20 minutes, and now I'm going to start what's called the stretch and fold process. With sourdough, instead of kneading the bread like I would for a yeast bread, I stretch and fold it. So that's what we're gonna do next. I'm gonna put a little flour on my hands because I think I got the dough a little wet when I had to add a little extra water. But this process I typically do about 4 times. And today I'm experimenting with giving the dough a little bit of a longer resting period in between my stretches and folds, because the recipe that I've been using only gives the dough about 10 minutes to rest in between each of the stretches and fold processes. But I've noticed a lot of other recipes say to give it a lot more time. So I thought, well, you know, just in the spirit of experimenting, I'm going to go ahead and just try and let it rest for about 20 minutes in between. So that's what I'm going to do. One of the things I wanted to mention about sourdough is that it has been around for literally thousands and thousands of years, going all the way back to at least 3700 BC. There's even evidence of sourdough. There's a mosquito. There's even evidence of sourdough in Mesopotamia, so ancient civilization. And it's just pretty amazing that something like this has been going on for that length of time. In Alaska, sourdough became popular when people came up in the 1800s for the Klondike Gold Rush. So the settlers and miners and trappers and all of those people, it was very difficult for them to get supplies, like things like yeast. And so they got into sourdough, which they could keep going as long as they would feed it. And a lot of times they would keep the sourdough warm by putting it in a pocket or in something around their neck so that it wouldn't freeze. Over time, the term sourdough became synonymous with long-term Alaskans. So if you're someone who's new to Alaska, you might be called a chichaco. And if you've been a long-time Alaskan, you might be called a sourdough. All right, well, typically I do the stretch and folds I do about 10 of them, and I haven't been counting, so I'm pretty sure I've probably done at least 10. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this rest again, and that's how it's looking at the moment. This is where I am putting together my sourdough. I'm just right outside of the cabin, working on an old table. But it's just a typical cloudy, cool Alaskan summer day. And that blue tarp is covering up the wood pile, so a bunch of wood that we need to split. Oh yeah, the dough is feeling really good now. It feels moist, but it's not sticking to my hands quite so much. And it's just coming together the way that it should. I don't know how else to say it. There's just kind of a feel to dough and it feels right. So hopefully the issue I had with my scale earlier isn't gonna throw me off completely. Oh, one other fun fact I forgot to mention about sourdough, the history of sourdough, is that it was the primary source of calories for the Egyptians who were building the pyramids. So I think that's pretty neat too. In my mind, I always think of sourdough as being kind of an Alaskan sort of thing or a northern sort of bread, but it very much has its roots in much warmer climates. Yeah, so a lot of times I have to shake the dough down to get it kind of long enough in order to fold it over and push it together. But I think that's pretty good. Cool. All right, it's back to resting. This here is an old stove that I found in the woods last time I was up here. We know that this property must have some extensive history, simply because we have found things like this around the property. And there's even been some kind of dilapidated buildings or just things that we found in the ground that make us think there was something here long before the cabin that we're using. So you never know. But it'll be fun to try and clean up the stove at some point, and maybe we can put it down in what we call the shed. There's a second building on the property that isn't completely finished, but we'd like to someday get around to working on that. Okay, I'm on to my next stretch and fold session. Let's see how it's feeling. Oh, it's feeling really good. I think I mentioned that I'm experimenting with letting it rest a little bit longer in between the stretching and folding sessions, and I wonder if that is making a noticeable difference. So I might be onto something new. Then after that, I usually let it sit for about an hour. And then I do it one more time and let it sit for several hours. So we'll see. It's feeling pretty good. Once again, I didn't count how many times that was, but we will just go with it. We'll cover it up again. All right, then we'll be back. My dad's out here doing some weed whacking. Really helps with the mosquitoes to just keep the grass and other plants pretty short right around the cabin. All right, so I'm gonna stretch and fold one more time, and then I'm gonna put it to bed for about an hour, and I'll bring it inside so it's someplace warmer. Oh man, this is feeling really good. I think letting it rest for a little bit longer is gonna make for a really good loaf of bread. Okay, oh, I'm getting some dirt in there. That's, you know, how it goes when you're making sourdough bread, right next to a wood pile. See? You know, outdoor living, what can you do? All right, so I'm gonna cover that. I'm gonna bring it inside where it's a little bit warmer and it can rest for an hour. So my dough has rested for about an hour and it just looks pretty much the same, but that's normally how it looks too. So now I'm going to give it a little bit of shape and then I'll tuck it in for a few hours. I brought along a little bit of white rice flour. This is often what I've seen people use for sourdough. I guess it doesn't end up like, I don't know how to explain it, but it doesn't incorporate into the dough in the same way it would be if I was using like a wheat flour. So, ooh, it's got a little sticky. Let me get this out of here. Ooh, there we go. And then I was thinking of trying some other ideas. So I was watching some videos and they were really kind of stretching and pulling the sides and tucking it under a little more aggressively than I've done in the past. So I'm gonna try that. This is a learning process. And then I just want to get this covered in the rice flour, and that will keep it from sticking to my tea towel that it's going to then sit in. So I've got this wonderful tea towel. I find that something that's really thin and doesn't have a lot of bulk to it works pretty well. And then I like to take more of my rice flour and just try to get it all around. Once again, we just want to prevent sticking because that's always a bummer. So we got that like this. Let me just get a little more rice flour on the ball of dough. And then we'll put it in there. And I like to take the stuff from the counter. I did wipe this off before I started, so I will get that all together. And then I just sprinkle it around on my little loaf. So that's what it looks like at this stage. And now it's gonna just sit in a warm spot here in the cabin for a few hours. We're gonna head out and do some other things. And when we come back, hopefully it will have risen and we can maybe bake it for dinner. Well, we're gonna head down to the watering hole and fill up our water jugs and also go to the library because I'm taking a class and have to join a Zoom meeting today. So let's go. Right, here we are at the watering hole. Do this. We're going to put $2 worth of quarters in. Wow. Well, there's the first two. hold 3 gallons, which is a very easy amount to carry. Now we just got to fill up these. Floaties in this one. Ah, get my hand out of the way. I guess it's designed for people who are right-handed. All right, so we've let the dough just kind of rise all afternoon. It is looking very good and ready to be baked. So next up, we need to get the pilot light lit underneath the stove. Get my ponytail out of the way. There we go. All right, so what I ended up doing was I got the Dutch oven out of the actual oven because I was preheating it a little bit, and then I just flipped my dough into the Dutch oven. Normally I would put it on parchment paper and then place it in the Dutch oven, but I forgot to bring that. So I just greased this up really well and just put it in there. So I've done it before this way, so it should be okay, but it'll be what it'll be. So I'm just waiting for the oven to preheat a little bit more and then we'll get it in there to bake. Okay, I think we're ready to put the bread in the oven to bake. Got my big heavy Dutch oven. We're gonna stick this in here. All right. I usually bake this for about 28 minutes at home, then I take the lid off and bake it for another 5 minutes, but we'll see how long we need to do things here. All right, well, we've pulled the bread out of the oven. And there it is in all its gleaming glory. Now I need to get it out of the pot, which once again, normally I'm using parchment paper, so it's just a matter of pulling it out. But I think I'll have to maybe flip it out. This could be dicey. The really hot pan. Ah! Okay, not the prettiest method, but yeah. All right, and there it is. All right, well, even though the sourdough didn't turn out quite as well as I was hoping, I think it's still looking pretty good. Oh yeah, can never go wrong with fresh bread. So that's it for this episode of Happy Alaskan. If you have any tips or tricks that you like for making sourdough bread, please post them in the comments. I'll see you next time.